Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to MALN Opinion Plus, a weekly series airing every Friday. This is a space for our opinions, where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we are joined by Joel Rivera, Director of Organizing at MERA Coalition in Boston. Joel joined MIRA in 2016 and has helped pass pro-immigrant policy at all levels of government. Welcome to our show this week, Joel.
Thank you so much for having me.
To start, would you mind telling our audience a bit about the work you've done with MERA Coalition and the communities you serve around Boston and Massachusetts?
Yeah, absolutely. So MIRA is like you said, Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. We're the largest immigrant and refugee advocacy organization in New England. We've been around for 33 years and primarily work on supporting and promoting immigrant rights and inclusion. Definitely a very strong voice at the local, state, and national levels. So we have our hand in a lot. We do a lot of advocacy work at multiple levels of government.
All right. And how has the coalition's work changed and grown over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic ever since last year?
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely knew it was going to be really challenging for everybody, but especially for immigrant and refugee communities. Um, as we predicted and as we saw play out, COVID infection, hospitalization, death rates, as well as job loss and food and housing insecurity, particularly impacted immigrants, undocumented folks, and folks who were speakers of other languages. So what we did was respond as quickly as we could. We pivoted our advocacy to respond to the immediate needs of immigrant and refugee communities and our members. So, for example, we advocated successfully at the state level for millions of dollars to be distributed by grassroots community groups to the families most in need.
Oh, wow. And what would you say has been the biggest struggle for immigrant communities to deal with in the face of COVID-19?
I don't know if there's one factor. I think, as I just mentioned, there's a number of them. I think language access has been incredibly difficult. I think job loss and food and housing insecurity has hit those communities very, very hard. And then you couple that with um, you know places like Chelsea and Everett being in the red, being the hardest hit communities in Massachusetts for infections, hospitalizations, and death rates. Those are also the same places that have a lot of essential workers. Those communities are chronically underfunded, and so we see exactly how the census, like the 2010 census and the censuses before that, um, contribute to underfunding of those communities, so that whenever something like a pandemic hits in 2020 and we're doing a next census, we're also seeing the ramifications of previous censuses that have led to the underfunding of these communities through healthcare, education, and a number of other things.
Yeah, so I was actually looking to talk about that and redistricting a little bit, since this
Mhm.
year Massachusetts will redraw its electoral maps at the local, state, and national levels based on 2020 census data.
Mhm.
How do you believe redistricting will affect Latinos as well as other racial linguistic minorities in Massachusetts?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it'll have a huge impact. So we are leaving power on the table in some ways. The last census was hugely impactful for us because we were able to double the number of majority minority districts where there was a racial or linguistic minority at the state level, which is amazing, and the number of non-white men who hold seats in those 20 districts has grown over the years. We were also able to create the first majority BIPOC district in Massachusetts, the Congressional District 7, which consists of most of Boston, parts of Cambridge, Somerville, all of Everett, and a number of other communities, which Ayanna Pressley now holds. So the positive effects of our efforts are right there. Um, and that's something that we're hoping to do as well this year, to make sure that there's a fair and transparent redistricting process, that everyone in the community, the Latinx community included, is involved in to have their say in what the districts look like, so that the whole point is so that we have our best shot of electing people who have our rights and our needs in mind in office.
Of course. And do you see something similar happening in 2021, or do you have any sort of predictions for this redistricting process compared to 2011's?
Yeah, I think we have a template for success. In 2010, we had a lot of great community groups and community members involved in the process. We were able to shift power, I think, back to BIPOC communities and immigrant working class communities, and through the changes in the process, the state legislature really took our unity map into account, and so the current map looks a lot like the one that we proposed. So we're hoping a similar process will take place this year, where we'll do all the heavy lifting for the next 6 months, get as much community input as possible,
Mhm,
and then at the end of the day in November, when they redraw the districts,
mhm.
due to our working close with the state legislature and the chairs of the redistricting committee, that what we want will largely be what we're able to see.
Amazing. And can you tell me a little bit about your work with the Drawing Democracy Coalition and why it's so important for these immigrant community voices to publicly talk about the parts of their community that they believe should be kept together?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're part of the steering committee of the Drawing Democracy Coalition. Very proud members. It's a group of community-based organizations, of lawyers, of other coalitions. We work very closely with the funders. Um, so we're all working very closely together to make sure that there's adequate funding for community groups, so people are getting paid for their work. Um, that the right demographics and geographies are being funded to do that work, and then that we are, building capacity in those organizations too. Everything that we do, we want the first goal to be a fair and equitable redistricting process, but we also want to build capacity. I'm sorry, in immigrant communities. So we're making sure that we are training folks, that we are preparing them to train others in their community, so that folks know what the redistricting process is, know that they should be empowered to engage in it, and to actually do so by helping, provide community input on the mapping process.
Mhm. And how are some ways that people in these communities and in the state can get involved and shape how this redistricting happens and get their voices heard?
Yeah, so the best thing that folks can do is visit the madrawingdemocracy.org website. There's a lot of really good information there that my colleague Carissa is helping put together. We're making sure we're doing regular newsletters to folks to give them updates on when we're having hearings, like, hey, you should come testify at this public hearing for redistricting because it's in your district. We're also hosting a number of trainings, as I mentioned earlier, that would be great for community members to attend so that they can learn about the process, and begin to provide input in the community mapping as well. We are also on all forms of social media, or many forms of social media, I should say. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We don't have a TikTok yet, but that might be coming down the pipeline. Um, yeah, so I would say madrawingdemocracy.org and following us on social media would be a great way to start.
All right. And then just kind of wrapping up here, is there any other information, news, resources you would like to share with our audience other than those ones you just said?
Yeah, I would also, as I said, MIRA is very involved as well, and we have our own constituency that we move. MIRAcoalition.org has a lot of wonderful resources on a number of things, including COVID-19 and COVID vaccines. Um, Following us on all forms of social media as well, I think is a great way to get involved. And I can also drop in the chat a few of these resources, as I mentioned. We have a lot of multilingual resources on COVID-19 that I think are really useful for folks. They're made specifically for immigrant and refugee communities. And then I wanted to include one little plug for our citizenship team. They're wonderful. We provide free citizenship assistance and DACA application assistance to the folks who need it. You can learn more about that at meracoalition.org/citizenship.
Great. Thank you so much for talking with us today, Director Rivera, and for
Thank
being our guest on MALN Opinion Plus. Tune in next week for another episode. Follow us on Twitter at MA Latino News and Instagram at MA_Latino News. I'm Diego Viruel with MALN Opinion Plus. See you next time.